a lot of you guys have asked me to watch this video.
Hey, what up, boys? Man, these content creators and community members are certainly carrying my ad revenue this month. First, we have some woke agendas, then Josh decided to remind everyone he doesn't actually play MMOs. We got the bold man reacting left, right, and center, and Mr. Top 10 MMORPGs to play with no friends. The lucky ghost himself, delivering some juicy controversy straight to my door. I didn't even have to pay him like I did with the others, so this is glorious.
Okay, let's see it. Fake drama is my only content. Oh, it's his classic WoW arc. I like that.
However, I'm not going to be addressing the topics in the video at hand. I'm sure you've all watched it yourself and have seen various reactions, so you can absorb a bunch of shit takes because you're starving for any kind of content whatsoever. And I admit,
to make you feel
I have been withholding your usual dose of copium this month to enjoy my sudden increase in revenue.
That's right.
I'm just so ashamed that I've let down my fellow copium addicts. I will make it.
Starts making some money, abandons the fans. Just the normal everyday YouTuber fucking... this what they do, man.
Up to you guys. Just please continue to watch those ads.
Okay,
the video in question did bring up some great points and concerns. However, it's important to remember that Ashes of Creation is a Sandpark PvP MMORPG.
Okay.
The core gameplay literally doesn't support a pure PvE gameplay style. The game just wouldn't function correctly, and there's quite literally a list of 100 reasons why. So, in today's video, we'll be discussing this and a list of
The election method for military nodes would be considered. Would you have PvP? Arena would need to be examined on a PvE server for both function. 3 of your 8 PvP systems have now been affected. Pace and rate. Okay, so these are... okay, so there's like probably 20 reasons. Not 100, I would say. Less ship parts lost. Yeah, I think we'll address these one at a time.
100 reasons why. So in today's video, we'll be discussing this and much more. But before we get into that, our patrons and I would love for you to grab yourself a Coca-Cola because Ashes of Creation has a lot of systems upon systems governed by mechanics that 99% of the MMO player base don't even know exist. So it's perfectly understandable from an outside perspective, aka the people who don't live, sleep, and breathe Stephen Sharif's farts, that the idea of Ash's open PvP nature is very daunting to the majority. Today, I'm excited to dive into this and hopefully quell some of your worries in anticipation for what really matters.
Alright.
The game actually fucking existing one day. Now, with all that bollocks out of the way, let's begin, shall we?
I think it's also important to keep in mind, like, I feel like assuring people that it will work is just as bad as assuring people that it won't work. Because, like, none of us have really played the game in the beta. So, like, we don't really know if it's going to work out or not. I mean, it might work. It might not work. I don't think that you should be too attached to any outcome. You should just wait to see what happens.
So, to begin today's video, I think it's important to actually discuss what Ashes of Creation is as a game and the goals Stephen and the team are actually trying to achieve here. This highly anticipated MMORPG is not claiming to be a PvE or PvP game specifically. They've stated since the very inception that Ashes of Creation is a PvX MMORPG. But what does PvX actually mean? Well, it's a term for people that cannot comprehend what an open world PvP MMO is. In my opinion, the use of this term has caused some minor damage, not because the devs have not been clear, it's because the people for whom this term was created for cannot quite understand the basic mechanics that govern this game, leading to some severe misconceptions for how the PvP rules actually function.
I will say that if you have a PvP and PvE game, and you don't have a toggle, for a lot of people it will just be a PvP game. Because it will just cannibalize any of the PvE content. It's like in classic WoW, whenever you were trying to run to Blackrock Mountain and you'd get killed 8 times.
Or dumb. I'm calling you dumb. And because the average IQ of the MMORPG player base is far below average, the term PvX has become a weapon against the development of Ashes. An MMO should have never been divided between isolated PvP and isolated PvE. Players should always be able to interact, kill, or help each other. An MMO is just that, a massively...
Well, I feel like that's clear, that's like 100% like not true though, right? Because like you shouldn't be able to kill like level 1s that just started the game. I think most people can agree that like killing players that are like level 1 or something like that whenever they just load in, that's like not very fun. And also like killing people that are in cities. I think that those are 2 times that almost everybody can agree on are not good for a game. Why not? It's because you're gonna... It's not good for a player's experience to log into the game and just be immediately killed by somebody without any context behind it. It's like, imagine if you spawned in the Undead Asylum and as soon as you open the gate, Gwyn spawns and he kills you. In Dark Souls 1. But you know what I mean? Like, that's not necessarily a good time.
Multiplayer online role-playing game, which means that all players exist continuously in the same world.
Yeah.
Not in stages, not instances, not arenas, not raids, not shards, etc, 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 but as the years have gone by and the player base grew up, in name only mind you, they started throwing their toys out of the pram and were insistent that they knew how to run this genre better than the devs who originally created it. So again,
which I think is 100% true. That's really what happened, is that, you know, if you look at the original developers that made games like Ultima Online and stuff like that, and EverQuest, it was really the players who said, fuck that, these games are garbage, I'm gonna make my own game. And then you had World of Warcraft, and then you had somebody who said, fuck that, this game is garbage, I'm gonna make my own game. And then you had Final Fantasy XIV. And then now you have, fuck that, these games are garbage, I'm gonna make my own game, and that game's Ashes of Creation. So I don't think that there's really as big of a difference between the developers and the players in terms of perception of like how the game is. And I don't think that the community is like that far off from what it actually wants. But I do agree that there are some times that players want something that is not necessarily what's good for them.
Does PvX mean? It doesn't mean that you are promised a 50-50 split of both PvE and PvP content. It means that the progress of your character is directly affected by your ability to explore the world and use resources, as well as fend off players with which you have a conflict of interest. But there's no denying toxic PvP is a death sentence for most MMOs. Griefing and cannibalism has pretty much killed all MMORPGs that dare call themselves open world PvP. But did they die because of the PvP? Or did they die because they were all jam-packed with infinite amounts of pay to win and zero content to actually engage it? I find it rather strange.
It's a little bit of both, right? I mean, obviously those kinds of games do die, but there are also infinite amounts of pay to win inside of Lost Ark, for example. And also there's limited content inside of that game. So like the one like consistent variable is that games with an open world PvP always on, forcing everybody into this situation, pretty much every single one of them dies. Whereas a lot of the PvE games don't die. Like New World, Elder Scrolls Online, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy. And some of those games like WoW is pay to win, Lost Ark is pay to win, etc.
When people attack this particular aspect of Ashes when, in the current year, all our popular MMOs are
hollow corpses.
And the players who still play them also embody
Hollow corpses.
back
part is
before
true.
this insidious single-player mentality began to take over roughly 10 or 12 years ago, community interaction
I don't think that the single-player mentality took over 10 or 12 years ago. I think it took over in 2004. Because one of the biggest selling points and why WoW completely killed EverQuest is that you could level up to 60 without being in a group or without having to know a lot of people. Is that whenever you really look at a game like WoW and a game like Final Fantasy, these games were popular because you could play solo. And I think this is a massive thing that a lot of people really like. And I think that also MMO... people are too attached to the idea that you have to play and cooperate in shared goals inside of an MMO in order to be successful inside of the game. But the reality is that that's really not predicated or based on anything. There's no real law that says that has to be the case. And I think whenever you actually, this is a bit of an abstract example, but I think that whenever you go and you look at, a lot of the popular animes that are set inside of video games, so Sword Art Online, Overlord, to a extended degree Goblin Slayer, many of these games are focused around primarily solo activity. One individual player doing a lot of things, whether it's Kirito, Einzelgone, or Goblin Slayer, right? All of these are the exact same. And I think the reason for that is because there's a lot of people that want to exist in a shared world and sometimes cooperate with other players, but they don't want that cooperation to be mandatory or some form of pass to enter. And I think that's represented in the popular media about MMOs, and I think that's also represented in the games that people play.
action was a core part of this genre, and PvP was a large majority of this. There are no memorable or interesting events that happen in MMORPGs that involve that single-player-esque gameplay loop. It's the massively
I don't know about that. I think that there are a lot of really memorable things that you can do inside of a single-player loop. I think some good examples of that would be obviously like getting certain mounts in Warcraft, getting invincible, etc., finishing the main story quest in Final Fantasy XIV, finishing different types of like profession goals in New World. I think that there are a lot of single-player goals that Mage Tower, there are a lot of single-player goals that you can accomplish as a single player and then start to feel good about what you're doing in the greater scheme of the game itself. And I think that's one of the really good things about MMOs, is that MMOs give you that ability to exist in that shared world. Because I think that's the one thing that MMORPG really means, is that it's massively multiplayer and online. That's it. Everything else is just this is a bias. Yeah, solo challenges to flex on other players in a shared space. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I really hope PoE... Like, one thing that's kind of sad is, like, a game that really does this super well is Diablo Immortal. Diablo Immortal does this so well. And of course it does. Their whole fucking the whole fucking business model is based off of it, right? Pitting the whales against each other, but going into the city and being able to inspect other players and see the accomplishments that they've had and then compare them with your own. I think that's really good. I hope PoE 2 does that, and it seems like Diablo 4 will too.
Multiplayer elements that make this genre interesting and unique compared to literally every other genre out there. So let's change gears a little and actually discuss Ashes of Creation's plans for PvP and why it's different to what most of you are probably used to.
Let's see.
So Stephen himself jumped into the comment section and addressed a few interesting things related to the PvP mechanics. This is good for me to pad out this video momentarily for that sweet, sweet ad revenue, and I can use this to actually transition us into mechanics that actually already exist and are positively received by the modern MMORPG player base. Stephen started by explaining Ashes of Creation's PvP systems are actually very close to what Lineage 2 had back in the day, modernized slightly to prevent some of the obvious flaws that it had. He touched on how
That's one of my concerns, is that there will be other flaws in the system. It's like while you solve some problems, people will figure out other workarounds, etc. And that's one of my big concerns with this, is that if you have a flagging system that's not like a toggle or something like that, you will always have different ways that you can fuck with people, or you can work around the system. Yeah, there's always loopholes and stuff like this. And that's what worries me. Now, in a perfect world, would there be loopholes? No, but would we ever get there? It's very hard to say yes to that.
Control is treated differently, the disparity between player levels, the nullification of alt characters exploiting the corruption gain, and of course emphasizing the punishment length of being corrupted in comparison to what it was in Lineage 2. But what is this elusive corruption system, I hear you ask? Well, in Ashes of Creation, you can quite literally flag yourself for PvP anywhere in the world with a press of a button and attack anyone, provided they are either 1, not in your group, and 2, not in your guild. Now that may sound scary to you dad gamers out there, as your crippled boomer hands can hardly perform a basic rotation in WoW, but there's a system that actually protects you from being randomly murdered by sweaty neckbeard kids all day, every day. And that system is called corruption. When you brutally murder an innocent to stroke your EP in Ashes of Creation, you're hit with a massive negative status effect that not only makes you a huge target for everyone, but also reduces your performance as a player by a significant amount. The goal for this corruption mechanic, in my opinion, should be to nullify all forms of random pointless murder and punish these so-called griefers in some way, shape, or form. This
is one of the questions that I kind of have, is that, like, what does this really look like? Because is there a world where a system like this could work and be good? Yes. Is that world going to be Ashes of Creation? We don't know. So the thing to me is, like, we can talk about this like on a philosophical level as much as we want, but the truth is that we don't really know. We're all just talking shit until the game comes out. Because until we really see what happens, until we really see how people play the game, then everything else is just kind of like, I don't fucking know. Like, maybe it's going to go this way, maybe it won't. Yeah, you have to see that, you have to see the game. And I think that, like, again, it's all projection.
System mimics very closely Black Desert Online's karma system, and although BDO is very flawed as an MMO, leaning on some very single-player aspects, the karma system works well, and improved upon, can easily create a meaningful open-world PvP environment here in the modern age that complements and encourages the social gameplay we've been missing so much. Now,
I remember, like, whenever I played BDO, and this is like, I was like level 45 or something like this. I think it was the first time that, like, you could kill people at a level, because, like, the soft cap then was like 50. And I kept getting killed by this other random guy. And every time that I would try to farm these mobs, I just kept getting killed. And, like, this guy was like level 51. He was already past the soft cap. This guy was a massive fucking farmer. And then finally, you know, once we actually got to that point, we would do the same thing to other people. And I remember there were these guys, I think they were called like Sausons or something like that, sausages or some kind of fucking shit. And like, we had our farming spot, and if anybody ever went to that farming spot, we would just mercilessly kill them until they leave. And I can pretty much assume that a lot of people probably didn't have that much fun dealing with that. So I'm kind of curious to see if this is going to be the same thing. Yeah, I don't know. 5-man Saucing groups in 2017? Yeah, it was something like that.
I don't usually react to videos specifically because it's not really my style.
Yeah.
Saving that to pad out my streams in the future, you see.
Very smart.
But there was a particularly stinky take that I wanted to respond to specifically.
Okay.
Take it away, Asmon.
Every time that you give one player agency over another player's experience in a video game without their consent, the dramatic pauses, you will 9 times out of 10 create an outcome that is bad for the game. That's just what happens. Well, I'm not describing a multiplayer game, because unless you want to consider playing the game at all as a consent into doing this, then I think it's very different. Like in World of Warcraft, you can't have somebody randomly PvP you and kill you in the game. This just can't happen. Here we go.
Players interacting with each other is bad for the game.
It can be, yeah, it absolutely can be. Like, because if you can interact with another player and you can affect their game experience in a negative way, and they can't control that, then yeah, that's going to be bad for the game, because the only thing that does is it alienates people that just want to play the game normally, and it rewards people that want to play the game and harass other people. Yeah, 100% that's what happens. That's just what happens. There it is.
No, this can't be real.
Here we go.
He can't be serious. I must be misunderstanding. Yes. I know. The way I can truly understand him is to assume a new form. The only form that could understand this take. Now, Asmongold has some pretty bad takes when it comes to MMOs these days, and this particular reaction was a nice compilation that encompasses everything wrong with modern MMORPGs, but that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. They may be wrong, but diversity is exactly...
I completely agree. Everybody is entitled to their opinion, but they are also wrong. All right, let's hear it.
What I advocate for here on this channel. Without diversity, Ashes of Creation cannot make the correct choices. But I want to follow this up with an anecdote about risk versus reward and why PvP is important to me as an artisan main, aka a player who quite literally doesn't give two shits about combat. And I'm going to do this by taunting my favorite bunch of low IQ brainlets. New World was ass. Its combat was trash, its endgame was non-existent, and the moment-to-moment gameplay loop was boring. However, the thing that really ruffled me up was the gutting of their core PvP features in favor of appealing to as wide of an audience as possible. Originally, New World was supposed to be a faction-based open-world PvP game. However, Amazon, being the marketing geniuses they are, decided to implement a toggle-on PvP feature last minute. This feature is also known as War Mode.
That's not necessarily true. So basically, whenever the game came out, and this was in like 2020, the preview event of the game had War Mode on. So over a year ahead of time before the game came out, it had this toggle on, and before the game actually came out to the public, before it was released as in any sort of a playable form to the public, this was already enabled in the game. So unless you had played the alpha and you had done all the NDA stuff, etc., you would have never experienced what it was like to actually play New World with PvP always on. And I think that it's easy to say that, like, oh, well, New World made the bad decision by turning this off. But I think it's very easy also to say that New World saw that this was not good for the game and they changed it because of that. Because you also have to remember contextually, New World came out and like this change came out very soon after Phase 2 for Classic WoW came out. And Phase 2 led to a lot of exoduses off of servers, a lot of people quitting the game, people moving on from Classic WoW, playing other games instead, unironically going back to retail, etc., because they were unable to play the game in the way that they wanted to. So I don't think that it's outside of the realm of possibility that New World saw this happen. They saw that it was having a negative effect on the alpha tests that they were doing, and they changed it because of that. I feel like that was that would make sense.
Final nail in the coffin for World of Warcraft's open world PvP, giving players the ability to opt out of PvP in a game that is supposed to be PvP focused completely destroys any value that travel had, the socialization has, but
well, whenever you say destroys any value that travel had, what about one of the main complaints being that travel had value? And the value that was placed on travel caused hundreds of thousands of people to quit the game. Because it's very easy to say, yes, oh, well, the value placed on travel is important. That's nice, but whenever you place that value and you apply it to a player base and you see the player base drop by 90%, I think that this is just simply not a shared opinion. I don't see how anybody could say that, like, and again, you can like a game that has travel costs and it makes travel matter a lot, like Valheim, for example. Sure, I think that there are many people that like that, etc. But the numbers don't lie. The numbers clearly indicated that people didn't like that kind of gameplay and that type of content. And I would say that travel costs and travel time and everything were probably in the top 5 reasons why people were frustrated with New World for the first 6 months that it was out. Am I right about that? Because you have to remember that a lot of people don't have unlimited a lot of people don't have unlimited time to play the game. So it's very easy for somebody who's a content creator like me or Narc or, you know, anybody who makes these videos to say that, oh, well, travel should matter and all these things should matter and they should be important. But you're just simply not going to convince somebody who has, you know, 2 or 3 hours a day to play the game. And before you say that's casual, this is 2 to 3 hours a day. Like, this is a lot of time, just like a part-time job to play the game. That half of that time that they should be playing the game should be invested in between going from point A to point B. It's just simply not something that people want to invest their time into. And I think that, again, like, all of these things are, like, they can make Ashes of Creation however they want, but I don't think that you can make the argument that travel mattering is a good thing for a game in any metric. Every single observable metric shows that travel, quote, mattering has been harmful to the game, if you want to use the example of New World. And it's been tremendously harmful. Not true? I think so. How many of you guys were unhappy with New World because of how long and how much effort it took to travel around in the game? By any metric, seems like an extreme statement. Well, what other metric could you, like, what metric could you use to show that travel mattering inside of New World was a good thing? Give me one metric. Okay, right. So we don't have one. All right, let's move on.
Most importantly, the economy has. I was heavily focused on the economic side of New World. It is what I specialize in after all, and I have never witnessed a crash at the launch of an MMORPG quite like New World's. For weeks, players couldn't even afford to repair because every single material was worthless. It was made worthless because the game that was supposed to be designed around contesting materials with PvP allowed players to just ignore this particular gate and turn off their PvP like the careless dad gamers they are and
That's not why it happened. The reason why the economy crashed in New World is because people were able to dupe. Like, they were literally able to turn one item into 30 items. So that's why the economy crashed. So it really didn't, and also it had to do with the balancing of the resources themselves. So the issue with New World is that, I think that, yeah, he can use, let's look at Star Metal. Oh, I messed something up. MS Paint. Right, and so you basically had a really big problem where the resources were functioning like this, where you had iron here, and then you had steel here, and then you had Star Metal here, and then you had Orichalcum up here. And so the problem was that the iron itself, you needed iron to make steel, and you needed steel to make Star Metal, and you needed Star Metal to make Orichalcum. But the issue is that based off of the way that it is scaled, it was a multiplicative value. So if you want to make one Star Metal, you need this much more iron. And if you want to make one Orichalcum, you need this much more Star Metal, which means that you need this much more steel, which means that you need this much more iron. So what the issue was, is actually iron was high value, And then what ended up happening is the high-end resources became low value because there were so many people that just didn't have the low-end resources to fill out those high-end resource values. So it killed the value of star metal temporarily, and then it rose it above everything else because it became the least popular to farm, and also the least readily accessible because of just the way that the spawn points in the game worked. And also Orichalcum was a lot easier to farm because you had many more areas where you were able to farm Orichalcum in rotations. So that's another big reason why it happened. And again, I think the biggest reason, and the reason why iron had more value than star metal and sometimes Orichalcum, is because of the compounding nature of the crafting system. So if you didn't have the compounding nature of the crafting system, which was something that was fixed, you wouldn't have had this resource problem. But that wasn't even the main issue with the New World economy. The main issue with the New World economy was also the fact that gear was RNG, but it was not RNG to an extent that players were able to like readily access and deal with for the first 2 months of the game, because a lot of the systems in the game, like having trophies and having different weaponsmithing items or armor smithing items, were inaccessible until probably the end of the first month, maybe the second month, depending on the server that you were on. So a lot of these high-end items, Orichalcum, for every one Orichalcum ore that was farmed in the game, you would actually need 50 iron ore that were farmed in the game. But the issue was that there were 50 Orichalcum nodes and 50 iron nodes. So that's why the New World economy died. And primarily it was because of the duping. So it really didn't have anything to do with PvP or not PvP. It was like fundamental mechanics of the game and the way that those things affected the game.
Trees forever.
Not a great plan.
Ashes of Creation is very different in this regard, and is handling PvP in a way that complements sandbox gameplay by protecting the one thing that actually matters: the economy. Something the modern player base seems to have forgotten is that you can actually balance your own risks. You decide when the risk is too high for you in terms of what you could drop out of your inventory. That is quite literally the beauty of player agency and why MMORPGs used to be so fun. You were the one.
I think economy does really matter, but for a lot of people that play the game, it's not super important. So I don't think economy is the end-all and be-all for an average player experience.
Making the choices, not the game creating rigid, theme park-esque rules and telling you how, when, and why you should be playing. Unless you're corrupted, you won't drop any gear. Therefore, Ashes of Creation is not a full loot PvP MMO. If anyone tells you it is, they are woefully uneducated. But there has to be some incentive for PvP, or it just ends up bland with no real meaning to anything, aka modern theme park MMOs. Now, the balance of all this is 100-fold. Obviously, over the years as MMOs became more shallow, less and less content was available to players who actually want MMORPGs, which means the actual PvP...
I think that people that want MMORPGs, like a good example of a game that I think really delivers on the experience that people want out of an MMORPG is actually Final Fantasy. I think Final Fantasy probably does the best job at delivering the MMORPG experience, because you have single player activities, you have a lot of group activities, guild activities, and like housing activities and things like this that are focused more around like players interacting inside of a game. I think that a lot of times people view MMORPG through the idea of either combat or economic interaction. But the reality is that there's also a massive world of social interaction that is larger than both of those. I think that things like the Goldshire Inn and stuff like this show that very well. And I also think another example of that is just Final Fantasy. There's a lot of people that play the game that don't really do a whole lot of combat or do anything else, but they log on every day because they have a community that they built up in the game. So I don't think that like really this is true. I think this is only true in the context of something being a combat-centric game. Do you see kind of what I'm saying? They have a good RPG experience field. Yeah. But you don't like sandbox-oriented MMORPG? Well, I'm willing to address any argument that people have, but most of the people are not able to actually present an argument that is good. Like I feel like I've addressed, like, for example, using the argument of New World's travel or New World's economy as an example of why PvP is needed in the game. This is just factually untrue. It's just untrue. As somebody who's put 1,000 hours into the game, it's just not true. And I can explain how it's not true. So I'm willing to listen to what people's feedback is and other arguments, but saying that I'm wrong doesn't mean anything.
Content available is a very, very important aspect of any MMO. You need to have multiple ways of engaging in content. If there is only one endgame dungeon and everyone is camping that, then it does become a boring gank fest where only the top PvP guild can succeed. However, if there are 10, 20, 30 dungeons and the community is spread all across these, the choice to move and contest somewhere else is always an option. And
I think this does happen, but I think that it's also kind of an issue whenever it does. So, like, for example, New World tried doing this by making multiple points of interest also level 66 in the game. But there will always be a best, and you will always see people competing over the best. So the only way to really make this happen is to either make the best dynamic or to rebalance it on a nearly weekly basis, which is also, that's fine, but usually those players are dynamic enough to really adapt to the change within a day of the change happening, so it doesn't really make that big of a difference.
Option that has been missing in pretty much every MMO up until Ashes of Creation. This goes for the plethora of open PvP zones Intrepid have begun revealing to us as well. The oceans, the newly revealed ruins mechanic, and of course, the one I predict will be most common, the caravans. What I think is important to realize here is that Steven and the team have a lot of experience with PvP in MMORPGs as outlined by his comment. But for now though, here in pre-Alpha 2, personally, I think it's pointless to talk about a mechanic that was so broken that it literally got disabled in the first few hours of Alpha 1. So let's take a moment to stop overdosing and remind ourselves this game is still many years away from release. We're not even...
And I will also say that the imbalance or the lack of quality in this specific mechanic is extremely important. Because if this mechanic does not function properly and does not adequately, like, kind of curtail ganking and people being able to just kind of play the game on their own, it will turn people away. Like, they just won't play the game. So it's like you can't have a bug in a system like this because people can abuse the bug and fuck over other players.
Even in a public alpha testing phase yet, so of course Intrepid are going to be innovating, testing, and changing their PvP systems to be the best possible version it can be, and it's down to us as testers and you guys as innocent bystanders to provide the correct feedback. Ashes of Creation has a lot of systems governing its PvP alone, and without PvP, this game ceases to even function. So let's end today's video.
I'm not sure if that's entirely true. I think that really, is this something that's actually true or not? Because if the game doesn't function without PvP, then I think you could make an argument that it's not really a PvX game, it's a PvP game. But it's clearly not a PvP game. And also, Narc even acknowledges that the game clearly has to function without PvP because he said that he wanted to be an artisan, which doesn't have anything to do with combat in the first place. So if you want to play the game to be a crafter, but you think that PvP has to be a core of the game, then you either have to do PvP or you can't play the game as a crafter. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't have both. Also, like, again, like the laundry list of reasons why the game wouldn't work without PvP always on, a lot of those reasons, whenever I paused and I looked at them, a lot of them were either redundant or just stupid.
pressing this particular topic because I think it is a very important one to touch upon indeed. Ashes of Creation isn't made for 90% of the modern MMORPG player base. The point of Ashes of Creation is to show that 90% how an MMORPG is actually supposed to be made. None of our currently popular MMOs are actually MMOs. They've devolved into single-player lobby games that give you the illusion of a massively multiplayer world because you can see the odd pleb running around playing their own single-player experience. In my opinion, the reason why MMOs are a dying...
I don't think that there's anything in the nature of what an MMO is that tells you that unless you can negatively affect another player's experience in the game without their consent, it's not a real MMO. I mean, I don't agree with this. Like, yeah, you're basically saying that a game has to have PvP for it to be a real MMO. So if the game has to have PvP for it to be a real MMO, you would clearly assume that you would have to be a PvPer to be a real MMO player. So if you're a crafter, you're not a real MMO player anyway. So why are you playing MMOs? It just doesn't make sense. So you wouldn't play the game. Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. Again, this is like a... if I can't PvP, it's not a real MMO. What? Yeah, exactly. I don't think this is really true. And I think that most people, it's not about not being able to PvP. I think the real thing that what's being talked about is non-consensual PvP. It's not, everybody is a fan of Arena. Everybody loves Battlegrounds. Everybody loves Sieges, etc. These are all great things that I think 98% of people think are fucking awesome. However, the question is about non-consensual PvP. That's the difference. Care Bear PvP? I think that a lot of the people that care about Care Bears and things like that are bronze ranked in every competitive game that they play. Most of the people that go and they try to take these games very seriously and these MMO games very seriously are mechanically challenged and awful at the game.
Genre is because it's lost its soul. It's lost its purpose to make way for the shallow, talentless corporate trash monetized out the wazoo with predatory, convenience-based practices. It's okay that Ashes of Creation isn't for you. You have your well, actually, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Your trash MMOs that cater to your lazy, shallow mentality in the form of Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, and...
I think lazy is like really... usually not a good word to describe somebody who doesn't want to do something that they don't want to do inside of a video game. So like you have to keep in mind that like a lot of people play video games because the video games are fun to play and they enjoy playing video games. That's really all it comes down to. So whenever you say somebody's lazy because they don't want to walk from town to town in New World because travel has to matter, they're going to tell you, yes, I am lazy. I don't want to waste my time doing this. It's not fun. Like, these people are not lazy. They just worked a job for 8 hours. They're an electrician. They're not lazy at all. They just don't want to do something that has no value.
Whatever else bends over backwards to shove convenience up your already torn up asshole.
Sometimes too much convenience is bad, though. I'll definitely say that. And it's not that he's totally wrong. It's that where on the spectrum right really is.
I'm going to touch on a comment I see very often from not only the copium addicts feverishly consuming information related to this non-existent game, but also from a lot of YouTubers much larger than myself. I want Ashes of Creation to survive, or I want Ashes of Creation to be big. And this comment rubs me the wrong way, because you're trying to advocate for things that quite literally killed the MMORPG genre.
I don't know how you can say that these things killed quite literally the MMORPG genre whenever you said earlier in the video that 90% of players won't like Ashes of Creation. And Ashes of Creation was there to show them what a real MMO is. So I don't see how we can have both of these here. My personal opinion is I think that, again, this is it's not really, it's always our place to give feedback as players. It's never not your place to give feedback. You can always give feedback about a game or whatever, about a stream. You can do that. Now, does that mean everybody has to hear you and, like give you a platform? No, but you can always give feedback. I think that there is a lot of people that are trying to like claim this game as like this is their game and it's going to be different than the games that they previously played because they have like an agenda behind it, right? Like, for example, like I don't want to have the game with a bunch of like cosmetic, like pay to win stuff. Like that's what I care about. I know like maybe Narc cares about something else. Other people care about like having destructible environments and like siege-based games. The reality is that I don't think the game should be made for any one type of player. The game should be made to be a good game that's rewarding, that causes people to come back and play the game. Because whenever you start trying to design it for a specific type of person and not really designing systems that are fun and good and fulfilling to play, that's whenever you start alienating everybody else. And I think that's what the issue is. And so, yeah, I think that it's very true that Ashes of Creation will not appeal to everybody, and it will probably not appeal to a lot of people in the same way that really, when you think about it, every single MMO doesn't appeal to a lot of people. Like, World of Warcraft doesn't appeal to a lot of people. Most people don't play WoW. It's the same thing as Final Fantasy, Lost Ark, New World, or Ashes of Creation. This is all the same. So it's about having a niche, but I think inside of that niche, you have to make the game actually fulfilling and fun to play. And I think that's really what the conversation is about. I think that many people play video games and they invest a lot of time into video games because they get fulfillment out of whatever they're doing in the game. Whether this is crafting an item, leveling up the character, winning in PvP, being a certain rank in CSGO. Fulfillment is, I think, what the core of the reward of video games truly is. And some of that fulfillment can just be a distraction, right? They're able to just think for themselves and just relax in this world and escape from reality. So whenever you attack what could be that fulfillment for other people, that's whenever you have people leave the game. The concern here is that for some people, fulfillment is ganking random people, right? And having this open world game that has some degree of consequences of non-consensual PvP. But there's also a lot of other people who gain fulfillment from being able to play the game and enjoy it kind of at their own pace without having to worry about these things. So how do you manage the two things? It's hard to say. But I do think that it's very obvious that there are clearly more people that don't like it than do. And I think that he even said that.
Want Ashes of Creation to succeed, you should be focused on improving the core design pillars, the social, meaningful, and satisfying progression that MMORPGs offered us back in their peak, back in the golden age. Not the
I will also say that player agency can be removed by other players. Like whenever you're not able to play the game in the way that you want, number 4 goes away.
These modern-day convenient systems and hand-holding gameplay that caters to the lowest denominator. Let us have our PvP. If it fails, it fails, but at least we tried. I don't want another MMORPG reskinned with the exact same thing the other generic 500 copy-pasted MMOs did before. If you don't like the prospects of Ashes of Creation, that's okay. Steven has said many times, Ashes of Creation is not going to be for everyone. I'm okay with the game settling on a couple of 100,000 players. I don't need the game to have millions or to dethrone World of Warcraft for that top spot. That's not the point of this project. The point is to prove that a true open-world PvP MMO can thrive in this age of single-player trash.
I don't think that was really ever the point of it. I don't think Steven ever said that was the point of it at all. And I think that him saying it's a PvX game implies that that's not really the point of it. I think there's a lot of people that are using like different things that said, like they effectively, like they take the thing that they care about inside of the game, and they extrapolate that into being the purpose of the game is to succeed as a game that has X, Y, or Z thing. I think that people are kind of in a way selfish to look at it from the angle of the kind of game that they want, and not really look at it in the scope of the fact that there are other people besides them that want different things. Yeah, they want what they want, and they're trying to kind of direct the game in that direction, which is effectively what everybody is trying to do, but I think it's important to call it what it is.
And still sustain itself without compromising its monetization with pay-to-win elements. If it succeeds at that, I truly believe it will spark a new era for this genre, because it will remind everyone exactly why World of Warcraft had 12 million players back in 2008. But as
I don't think that's really a very good argument in the context of this conversation. World of Warcraft in 2010, whenever it had 10, 12 million people, it had PvE servers. And they were more popular than the PvP servers. And it also had all instanced combat, even in vanilla WoW, minus the dragons.
As usual, I am just one nerd desperate for a good MMO. And my opinions mean nothing without yours in the comments below. And hey, I heard you like watch parties, and considering I've nothing to shill here at the end of this video, why not come and join our humble Discord community and waste your life talking about an MMO that quite literally doesn't even exist. Additionally, we will, as always, be hosting a watch party for this month's upcoming artisan-focused live stream.
I'm excited to see what that's going to be.
Nobody cares about your trash watch party. You didn't even bother to do one for Pantheon this month.
Oh, God.
I'm highly disappointed.
And to that I say, listen kid, Pantheon doesn't even have convincing concept art, let alone PvP, so why you're bringing up Pantheon again during this video is completely random, and quite frankly, nobody fucking asked. It's almost like you're just trying to artificially gaslight your game using my platform because, you know, we're high on copium.
I'm going to say one thing, is that I feel like with Pantheon, it wouldn't be a watch party, it would be a watch funeral, number one. Number two, I think that, like, the dozens of people that are excited about Pantheon, I really hope they get the game they want. Because I'm fucking tired of having them try to change my games to make it more like that fucking garbage. That lazy, grindy, pointless, time-wasting garbage. I want Pantheon to be good, so they'll fucking go play Pantheon. I don't want to hear about it. As Legend Breeze content build, yeah, no, I think this was a decent video, right? Although, again, I feel like, again, especially with the New World examples, etc., and the WoW examples, it's just, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. And I think that, again, I'm okay with that, and I'm always willing to, like, listen to other people's perspectives on this kind of stuff, but, you know, the facts are the facts. That's what happens. That's what it was. And Narc Allcraft, bro, I'd be happy to have Narc on Allcraft. I like Narc a lot. I think he's great. I just, in my opinion, I think that we have spent so much time arguing and debating. Oh, and there's another video about this too, by the way. We've spent so much time arguing and debating about this topic for a game that we've not really, like, we're all talking about a theoretical. I mean, like, let's be honest, right? We're all talking about a theoretical. I don't think that Ashes of Creation, and this is just, like, again, my opinion, I don't think that the game should try to label itself as being one specific or another specific thing. I think the game should try to be as good of a game as possible, and then whatever comes out of that, that's what they do. Because the truth is that with New World, for example, New World came out and it did exactly that. New World saw the things that people did like, they made more of those things, and it caused the player base to go up. So New World thought they were being a hardcore MMORPG, but it turns out it was really just Minecraft for balding old men. And guess what? There's a lot of people that are balding old men. And it worked. it worked. The game is growing again. There's more professions, etc. There's content being added to the game. There's a lot of things that are going on with New World that are positive, and this is reflected in the numbers. And I think, again, this is the point that I'm really trying to make, is that you can like a game that's not popular, but you can't say that doing something that's not popular, that has had a nearly 100% failure rate, is good for a game. And that's the difference. PvP and New World are okay, except for instance PvP. That's what killed PvP. What the fuck? Instance PvP died because it was broken and laggy. I feel like Outpost Rush was very successful, and people queue Outpost Rush regularly. It was the wars that were the problem because they were so laggy. I remember whenever I did it the first time I ever did a war in New World, it was just a lag fest. Didn't work at all. So again, like, these are people that don't really understand what the problem was, that are going around with their partial information talking about why the game was bad. It's just simply not true. That's not what it was.